Hi, I'm the wrong hero, and I'd like to welcome you to this presentation, which is called The Manic Kingdom. Now, I'd like to open up my very own hall of American presidents in the great American heartland, but I'm afraid I don't have the millions of dollars it would take in order to invest in a theme park which would enable me to do so. And so I thought perhaps I'd give you a little background about the project which I call the Manic Kingdom and describe to you the centerpiece exhibit of the Manic Kingdom, the Hall of Great Presidents, and perhaps a brief capsule summary of each of these individuals would be in order. Starting with President Wood, our first president. He didn't like swear words. He didn't want to fight wars in Europe. He wasn't a flashy dresser, and he was one of the richest men in the Manic Kingdom. He'd be a great Republican candidate if he ran for office today. His nickname was the farmer of his country. Next in President Land, President King, our second president. He was a school teacher, a lawyer, a politician, and our first vice president, which is why everybody has forgotten him. He was called the Colossus of Rotundity. Next comes our third president, President Wilde. He played the violin and was a red-headed agnostic lawyer who liked his slaves maybe just a little too much. They called him the Red Fox, even though he never had his own television show. President Mad was our fourth president. He weighed 100 pounds, soaking wet, and provided the inspiration for the Star-Spangled Banner. Some think he set the White House on fire while smoking in bed, but this has never been proved. Next we come to President Doc, our fifth president. He put rum in the nation's water supply, which is why his term was called the era of feeling no pain. He wore a cocked hat and buckles on his shoes and never appeared on the cover of Vogue magazine. Of that you can be certain. Our sixth president was President Prince. He was the son of a president. Some people refer to them as the son of something else, but I won't say what, out of respect for our presidents. He went to Harvard, wrote in Latin, raised silkworms, and drank French wine. And yet, he was the first president born on American soil. Pretty ironic, huh? Our seventh president was President Jack. He was a tailor who didn't give a tinker's damn about book learning, and some said couldn't even write his own name. And he was a soldier who executed spies, Indians, and people who insulted his wife. And yet, Harvard gave him a law degree. Go figure. Our eighth president was President Fox. He was a shrimpy bald head whose grandfather was named Quackenboss, and he liked whiskey and card tricks, and he was in the Masons, and he rode around in little ox carts during their annual parade. I hope you're enjoying these whimsical facts about our presidents here in the Manic Kingdom. Our ninth president was President Tip. He spent 1 month in office, had log cabin pancake syrup named after his birthplace, caught pneumonia, and died before he had a chance to write 1 page of his presidential memoirs. History's loss. Our gain, I suppose. Our 10th president was President Whig. He was so beloved that the government built a monument for him 50 years after his death. He graduated from college at the age of 17. By the way, it was William and Mary, and he entered college at, I believe it was the age of 12. Pretty prodigious. Our 11th president was President Gold. he kept all of his campaign promises, had long hair, and was baptized a week before he died. And he was a Scorpio. I would like to go into greater detail about our chief executives in the Manic Kingdom, but I fear that your attention span probably isn't great enough for me to devote an entire 2 hours to this presentation, and so I am merely giving you the sound bites, the highlights of the careers of these great men. Our 12th president was President Blank. His son-in-law later became the President of the Confederacy. Talk about in-law problems. Oh, and he had a horse named Whitey who he allowed to graze on the White House lawn. A portent of insolent presidential pets to come. Our 13th president was President Dumb. He was a wool carter from the burned-over region who never went to college and who is the most famously and fabulously obscure of all of our presidents. Our 14th president was President Cold. He was nominated on the 49th ballot and was affectionately known as Handsome Frank, Purse, and Young Hicko of the Granite Hills. That's a hell of a nickname. 65,000 people walked out on his inaugural address. To be sure, it was snowing, but still. 15,000 of them stuck around. His own party failed to renominate him, which I believe is a first, and a last. Some have said that he had a slight charisma problem. However, history does remember him. There was a suburb of Pittsburgh named after his Commodore of the Navy. So he's not totally forgotten. Our 15th president was President Fuzzy. Our only bachelor president, people like to call him 10-Cent Jimmy, for reasons which I suspect are lost to history and perhaps had best stay that way. He is chiefly remembered for having had the youngest vice president, which in itself is like quite a fact to whip out during cocktail parties. Ah, yes, our 16th president, President Tall. At 6'4", he gave up a very promising career as a semi-professional wrestler to become president. He is chiefly remembered today as the president whose head on a penny can be used to check for tread wear on tires. Particularly in the South, where people are still mad at him. Our 17th president, President Vito, the second tailor from South Carolina who became president. They still talk about how he gave his inaugural speech while drunk. Oh, and that leads us to our 18th president, President Drunk. He is fondly remembered for having smoked over 15,000 cigars and for being on the $50 bill. Our 19th president was President Cheat. He was the first president to visit San Francisco, and he never touched a drop of liquor in his life. Our 20th president was President Orator. He was nominated on the 36th ballot. He was the only president who could stop a riot, though that didn't keep him from being shot by a deranged office seeker. Our 21st president was President Machine. He signed a peace treaty with Korea and Nicaragua. Modern day presidents take note. And he was just about the only president who didn't write some kind of book. President Clean was, anomalously enough, our 22nd and 24th president, for which fact he is principally remembered. He's the only president who hanged convicted felons himself. None of this 3 strikes you're out business for him. No, sir, he pulled that lever, watched them drop. Folks like to call him Uncle Jumbo because he weighed 260 pounds. Our 23rd president was President Ben. His grandfather was also president, and he had the first billion-dollar Congress, and he looked an awful lot like one of the Smith brothers on the cough drop box. Then our 25th president, to restore the sequence, President Tariff. He had a yellow parrot. He acquired American Samoa, Hawaii, Guam, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines, though not at the same time as he acquired the Mexican yellow parrot. Oh, and he was shot by an anarchist who read too many newspapers published by William Randolph Hearst. Now we come to the beloved President Bully, our 26th president. He wore funny-looking glasses, and he wouldn't shoot a bear cub that was chained to a stake, for which fact he was universally beloved. And he was the first president to visit Panama and Puerto Rico and ride in a submarine. And he was the youngest president, the first president to win the Nobel Prize, and the president with the biggest teeth. Our 27th president was President Raft. Our most obese president, weighing in at 332 pounds, he gave us the income tax and cherry trees along the Potomac, destroyed because they had insect pests and fungus diseases. The cherry trees, that is, not the income tax. He let a cow graze on the White House lawn. Our 28th president was President Ill. He endorsed the film Birth of a Nation and made D.W. Griffith a very popular and wealthy man. His nickname was, affectionately enough, Coiner of Weasel Words. His second wife ran the country for a while when he was indisposed. Of his 14 points, only one ever made it out of the gate. I guess that would make his batting average somewhere like 70 or something. I don't know. I'm not good with math. One of our presidents could write Latin with one hand and Greek with the other. Pretty neat parlor trick. Not sure it would go, though, on a current affair. Kind of boring. Not enough action, you know? Our 29th president was President Dope, the most handsome president. He liked to play the alto horn, the cornet, poker, and he liked to entertain young ladies in the White House closet. He had a dog named Laddie Boy, and history tells us he was the first president to have a radio and to visit Alaska and Canada, which gives you some idea of his priorities. Our 30th president was President Dole. He played the harmonica, pretended to like fishing and pitching hay, and his hobby was juggling Indian clubs, and ironically enough, he was the first president to allow American Indians to vote and become citizens. Our 31st president was President Crash. He was the first president to have an asteroid named after him, also a series of squalid shanty towns, and was also the first president to gun down United States veterans on the streets of Washington, D.C. The way things are going, he may not be the last. He received over 75 honorary degrees from universities around the world and translated a treatise on mining from Latin into, I believe it was English. I would hope. Our 32nd president was the beloved President Deal. He was the first president to be on television, which is why many of us remember him. And the first president whose wife traveled on an airplane. He spoke fluent French and had a Scotty dog who was the first presidential dog to travel on an aircraft carrier. Or was it a destroyer? There's still a lot of people in the highest tax bracket who are angry at him and use his face on a dime to stop their automobiles on. Well, our 33rd president was President Hankey. Never a man to mince words, he threatened once to kick a music critic in the nuts because he didn't like his daughter's singing. It took his wife 20 years to get him to say the word manure, and he was the only president who was also a 33-degree Mason, and the first president to travel in a modern submarine. I hope I'm not boring you, but now we're getting into the presidents who may have been president when you folks out there watching this were alive, had been born. Namely, President Bald, our 34th president, the first president to be telecast in color. His hobbies were fishing, golfing, hunting, playing bridge, painting, and constructing superhighways to ensure quick evacuation of the road net. Where he got the time to actually run the country, I don't know. But there you have it. Our 35th president was President Bordello, and of course you see his picture everywhere on matchbook covers. Our youngest elected president, he patronized the arts and the company of a great many attractive actresses as well. Which, of course, I don't hold against him or anything. I'd be doing the same thing. I don't want to sound like chicken or anything, just because this is Massachusetts and everybody reveres the man and would probably want to kill me if I said anything bad about him. Not that there's anything bad to say about him, mind you. Just those are the facts, Anyway, let's move on. Our 36th president, President Tex. He rode around in helicopters a lot when he was running for the Senate, and he picked his dogs up by their ears. Plus, he had a map of Vietnam tattooed on his belly. Our first and I believe only president to hold this distinction. Our 37th president was President Ironbutt. He had a dog named King Timahoe. He ate cottage cheese for lunch every day, and I believe he put ketchup on it, or maybe it was a raw onion. I don't really remember. Oh, and get this. His father used to get horny during slow dances. And yet, he instituted a dance policy at his college, which was very strict. Go figure. His father was an alcoholic, and so he dropped bombs on Vietnam. Well, he still maintains to this day that he was forced from office. Okay, sure. Well, let's see, our 38th president, President Skip. Well, he liked to go skiing even though he was incredibly clumsy, and it took him 4 years to get through Yale Law School. And he'll give a speech if you pay him $10,000. He'll talk to anyone, anywhere for $10,000, and his son will invite you onto his yacht. I don't know how much he charges for that. Probably nothing if you're a pretty girl. Just keep these facts in mind. Let's see, our 39th president was President Lust. He had an enormous pair of teeth, like this, but even bigger, and he pardoned draft dodgers, gave away the Panama Canal, and is chiefly remembered today for having swatted a deranged rabbit away from his canoe. And that led directly to our 40th president, President Wink. He's fondly known, or was fondly known, as the acting president. He had a huge file of salty stories and anecdotes which he would trot out even during the most inappropriate occasions, and was never hesitant to tell, for which of course he is fondly remembered today. Even though he let himself be brainwashed by his right-wing father-in-law doctor. Oh, and he said the word well a lot, even though things weren't really all that well. He never let on that they weren't, which is probably another reason why everybody liked him so much. Let's see. Our 41st president, President Lips. You must remember him. He was the head of the CIA. He hated broccoli. He vomited on the Japanese Prime Minister after eating weird fish. He had a wife who looked like the Quaker Oats man, and a vice president who couldn't spell potato. And now we come to our current president, number 42, President Fat. He has a cat who vomits everywhere, a lot of sleazy real estate dealings and extramarital affairs, allegedly, in his past, a love of greasy French fries, and from where I stand right now, these appear to be his good qualities. Anyhow, I hope you enjoyed this little visit down memory lane and to the proposed Hall of the Presidents at President Land here in the Manic Kingdom. We will now cut short this portion of our broadcast and return to our regular programming. This is The Wrong Hero, hoping that you found this little tour of our great leaders to be one which was, if not hilariously funny or even mildly amusing, at least instructive and informative. I might add that virtually all of these facts are true. And I cite as my source Facts About the Presidents, written by an individual named Kane, Joseph Nathan Kane, 4th edition, published 1981 by the H.W. Wilson Company. And of course, the reliable World Almanac and Book of Facts, 125th Anniversary Edition. Available at fine stores that specialize in remaindered books everywhere. Once again, this is The Wrong Hero, and don't go away. We'll be right back.
And this is the Manic Kingdom. How are you? How are you? How are you? I'll tell you how I am. I am fine, I guess. Hi, I'm the Wrong Hero. Welcome to the Manic Kingdom. In the Manic Kingdom, my motto is, smile or I'll kill you. And in the Manic Kingdom, of course, the cute little Disney characters have been given dangerous drugs with horrendous side effects, and so when they greet you, the little tableau is something like this. Thanks for the steroids, Uncle Walt! Thanks for the hash, Uncle Walt! Thanks for the tranquilizers, Uncle! Because this isn't the Magic Kingdom, it's the Manic Kingdom. And in the Manic Kingdom, MICKEYMOUSE stands for Military Industrial Complex, Keynesian Economic Yoke, more of United States engulfment. Because this isn't the Magic Kingdom anymore, kiddies. It's the Manic Kingdom. Now, there's a big scandal about Euro Disney having lost $1 billion, and yet one Disney executive was quoted as having said, "What does not destroyed Disney makes it stronger. Which is kind of interesting because actually that's a quote that's a paraphrase from Nietzsche. And I never knew that Disney people were into Nietzsche, but I guess they are. Hey, how you doing? Hey, 30 years later, we're finally going to have a TVA for the Mekong Delta, just like LBJ wanted back in 1964. But some, at least people writing for the Independent, a newspaper published in London, have likened Euro Disney to a cultural Vietnam. So it all comes round again. And now Disney's going to build Historyland off in Virginia. And I can just see Disney's Industrial Revolution. It'll be something like, "Hi, Mr. Bill Owner, I sure want to work 14 hours a day." So, yes, do you want to put that, my assistant, Vass. Actually, I have 5 assistants. In fact, the subtitle of this presentation is The Wrong Hero and His 5 Assistants, His Fist. I had a dream about Disney. I dreamed that I was on a stagecoach and I was on an island which was actually just one long spit of sand in the middle of the ocean. And on one end of the island they had a Warner Brothers hotel, but there was an old crone with an apple outside of it, and I decided not to stop there. So we traveled by stage all day long until we got to the other end of the island, which was a Disney hotel. And it had pictures of all the most popular Warner Brothers characters in bright neon outside of the glittering facade. Daffy Duck, Bugs Bunny, and Porky Pig, of course, the holy trinity of the Warner Brothers cartoons. And yet it was a Disney resort, and as I walked into it, I said to the person at the desk, "Boy, you Disney people sure are on the ball. I went to the Warner Brothers place, and all they had was an old crone with an apple, and they didn't even invite me to come in. But you guys were right on the money." "Yes, sir." And that's because I was obsessed with this Disney material that I was preparing to do, and so I've been having these bizarre dreams lately. When you're stuck inside of the house with a blizzard, there's really almost nothing to do than watch television. Pay-per-view channel, cable will put you in the poorhouse, so it's television or nothing. And I had another dream. I was watching the commish of all things, and after I went to bed, I dreamed that me and the commish were stranded inside of this gigantic building and we were actually hunting this crazed psychopath who had a gun. I think he was left over from some other movie that we had rented on video. But then all of a sudden we found out that we're trapped in this gigantic room full of machinery with the crazed psychopath who was actually RoboCop, and little alarm buzzers are going off in the central part of the building, and a female RoboCop is watching us on a video monitor and preparing to come to our rescue as the crazed psychopath, vengeful RoboCop threatened me and the charmingly pudgy and yet depicted anyway as conscientiously astute commish were awaiting our doom. And I had another dream after I rented Rover Dangerfield and The Firm in the same night, and it was called The Farm. And basically it was evil farm animals conspire to trap Rover Dangerfield onto the farm for the rest of his life, but somehow he gets away from him, which was actually the plot of Rover Dangerfield, actually, so wasn't that strange a dream. But enough about me. Welcome once again to the Manic Kingdom. Thinking of opening up my own resort. It's going to be called Hero World. I haven't really worked out all of the particulars, but
what?
I do know this. We'll have an evil rent-a-car franchise. And whenever somebody comes in to try to rent an automobile, we're charging like $5,000 and confiscate their credit card and tell them that automobiles are evil and refuse to give them the car keys. And when we do finally give them the car keys, the damn thing won't start. and you'll have to lift the hood, unscrew the screws on the radiator, and take the radiator cap off, and then go back in the car and start it to see if somehow maybe some gas got into the radiator, and that's what's causing it. And let it run for about 5 minutes till all the gas burns off. Maybe adjust the idle a little bit, so instead of like, it's like, even when you have it in first gear, it's like, that's how high the idle will be on the evil rent-a-car vehicles. Of course, they'll rent you nothing but 86 Hyundais, and in first gear you'll be going, in the second gear you'll be going, in the third gear you'll be going, in the fourth gear, the car will explode, and there is no fifth gear. So, anyway, I'm the wrong hero, and I like to say this. I respect you. Sit. At once. We're going to have to get a different MC for this show.
Why? What did I do?
Well, a different MC, because MCs are like diapers. You have to change them every once in a while, and for much the same reason.
Oh, right.
Right, that's exactly right. So it's been snowing out there. You know what I feel like doing when I walk down the street? Not that I walk anywhere, but when I walk down the street, I feel like singing, "It's a marshmallow world in the city." Hey! I'm sure that would piss off a whole lot of people, because everybody treats the snow as if it's like the biggest catastrophe to happen since Bhopal, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, Bhopal, 1.5 feet of snow. What are we going to do? We're so dependent on our automobiles and public transportation. 1.5 feet of snow reduces us to chaos. It's Mother Nature's revenge. I like blizzards. You know why?
No.
Blizzards keep out the riffraff. That's what they say in the Midwest, and it's very true. Well, I'm the wrong hero, and I like to fight against the immense power of advertising, but before I do, a few words from our sponsors. The penis. Strong enough for a man, but made for a woman. But men like it too. And now this word for placebo light. Are you tired of placebo bloat? Do placebos make you feel heavy, listless, unwilling to go out in the morning? Well, we have the answer for you. It's placebo light. It has half the fillers and inert ingredients of regular placebos, and in fact it does less than nothing because it's placebo light. All those who criticize the wrong hero, I would like to say just one thing to them. You're dismissed. Because the wrong hero is America's least knowledgeable expert. And judging from the turnout today, which at this point is exactly 0, a great many people happen to agree. I'd like to say this to Boston. Thank you for ignoring me, because now I can feel right at home. A court of law has found the wrong hero guilty for reasons of temporary sanity. And I have this inspirational fighting motto for America. To prosper, give money to the wrong hero. It's true. Nancy Kerrigan.
Okay, wait, just relax. Use this one.
Somebody hit the microphone with an aluminum club just as I was about to say Nancy Kerrigan and Tonya Harding.
Yeah, right.
Nancy Kerrigan, America's superego. Tonya Harding, America's id. They should have never let Tonya Harding in the Olympics. It's going to teach us a lesson. No more commoners in the Olympics. Only aristocratic blue bloods or people who are willing to pretend to be. Now I have a question. Welcome to, by the way, the Manic Kingdom. And here's what's wrong? You have the reverb treble jacked up? If the police arrest a monk, does he have the right to talk? And now this question for those of us who live in the Manic Kingdom. What is an American? A guy who can crush ice in a coffee grinder. A woman who controls all the money in a family. Parents who are always very careful to do exactly what their children tell them to. And children so busy being children and a part of the childhood thing that they forget to become individuals. In America, the difference between a redneck and a wasp is $1 million, though not all the time. For example, look at Ross Perot. If Mary had drunk coffee when she was pregnant with Jesus, would Jesus have become an agent? I could see it. It would be something like, hello? Hello, who is this? David? David, listen, I don't want to talk to you. Let me speak to Goliath, okay? Goliath, patch me through the guy, okay? Come on, be snappy about it. Come on, snap, chop, chop, Goliath, or I'll throw a stone at you. Come on, come on. Hello? God? Big fella? I love you, baby. You're beautiful. I love you. I love your family. I love your act. It's dynamite. It's thunder and lightning. It's a stone tablet on the top of a mountain, man. It's like, what do you mean I'm your son? Oh, well, never mind that. Okay, listen, God, baby, your act. It's funny, it's funny, it's funny, it's funny, it's funny how people don't laugh. They're afraid of you, God. Lighten up a little bit. Come on, let your skirt up, you know. Shave that beard. Go for a Don Johnson look. A little bit of stubble around the edges, you know. Get some of that Grecian Formula 40 or something. You invented it? Well, never mind. Okay. Listen, God, it was beautiful talking to you. Patch me back to the Virgin Mother, okay? Hello? Mary? Mary Magdalene? I told you not to call me at work. Bye. So, yes, it is cold out there, isn't it, Vass? You know how cold it was? It was so cold, my hubcaps froze off of my car, and the car seat is as hard as a rock, and the hell of it is, I don't even own a car. It was somebody else's car that I was talking about. No, I'm into motorcycles. I'm into motorcycles, but I have a lot of problems with them. This is my Jay Leno mode here. I'm into motorcycles, but I got a lot of problems with them. I got singing rings, bottom end knock, and rocker box clatter. And that's just when I walk down the street. Well, I have a heckler line. Too bad there's no hecklers here to use it on. But here it is, and here's something, it'll be a stage direction. Turn on the red and blue strobe lights and nauseate that heckler. That's pathetic, to do your heckle lines when not only did nobody heckle you, but there's no hecklers or anybody else for that matter in the room. Hey, Vass, do you make the minimum wage?
Yeah, no.
No. You know what the minimum wage is?
What?
$8,640 a year.
Oh, yeah.
Can anybody live on? I guess you could live on that if you shared your apartment with 5 other people. But you know, there's a funny thing that happens when you do that. You get little notes in the morning, loving little notes like, "You left mushroom soup in the stove burners. I hate you." You know, and that doesn't do anything for your equilibrium. I mean, when you're living in an apartment with 5 other people, you spend most of your time in bars and shit just to get away from them. And you're not really saving any money that way because you're spending all your money on bars, you know? Anyway, you can't be a head chopper unless you got fuck you money. That's the lesson that the 80s taught us. And I guess the 90s will be the era of the service economy. Yeah, right. Can anybody say feudalism? I want to know. People in restaurants, 90% of them are really nice. It's that 10% of restaurant patrons that really get you. The ones who laugh when you burn your fingers on the cappuccino maker. You know, the ones who think that just because they're sitting down and eating a meal in the restaurant, that means that they're the master and you're the slave. You know, the sort of incipient Simon Legree, that bad 10%. Oh, busboy, bring me a glass of water, if you please. You know, the ones that snap their fingers, the ones who walk up to you and say, where's the bathroom? Do you know? It's like, lady, I've only been working here 10 years. Of course I have no idea where the bathroom is. You know, that kind of thing, and it really gets me. But being a white-collar worker isn't much better because you have to work on a computer. And computers are for people who don't know how to concentrate because they watched too much television when they were kids. And then they go to work and they stare at a video monitor all day long, so they don't even have to pretend to think even when they're at work. You know, so it's wonderful. It's wonderful. I'm beginning to wonder, what good are men anyway? We don't fight, we don't hunt, and we're not even needed to make babies anymore. Men are just big, hairy pets. I saw Camille Paglia talking at the Kennedy School of Government. I didn't have an opportunity to listen to very much of what she had to say, but one of the things she did have to say was, I learned about satire from Rabelais and Swift. And I felt like going up there and saying, yeah, and you learned about bragging from Rush Limbaugh, apparently. Anyway, so I was working on some of the attractions at the Manic Kingdom, and I think continuous performances of Hamlet, but with chimpanzees instead of human actors. So it'd be something like, alas, poor Simba, I knew him well. Hardly had the bananas and papayas grown cold on the circus table than my uncle married my mother. And of course the immortal, to be or not to be, or to swing from a tree. So, I don't like Granny Smith apples. I think it's derogatory. I think it's insulting to older people. I think they should refer to them as Elder Smith apples. They have this thing now where they want to build television monitors in the subway system. They fine you $100 if they catch you smoking because they're so afraid of secondhand smoke, but they're actually subsidizing secondhand video exposure. Just too much. Well, another one of the attractions at the Manic Kingdom will be dystopic musicals. Like, now this is something I've been working on for about 22 years. It's called 1984, the musical. I only got one song for it though. Just an old-fashioned hate song. And of course, the musical of A Canticle for Leibowitz. But I only got one song for that too. For Leibowitz, Wherever I May Find Him. And finally, of course, the musical version of A Clockwork Orange. Be a big production number. Me and my droogies, we got a real good thing. Yeah, so. President Bill Clinton has been acting confused during his first year of office, and I think, excuse me, it might have something to do with, excuse me, the LSD-laced cigars that the CIA had left over from when they tried to poison Castro. Maybe they slipped a box of those into the Oval Office, you know, by mistake, of course, and maybe that's why Clinton has been so confused. I think Clinton should resign. I'm talking about Hillary Clinton, of course. I'm the wrong hero, and This is, as I've reminded you innumerable times, the Manic Kingdom. And in the Manic Kingdom, we hate bureaucracy because it has a funny name. In the Manic Kingdom, our motto is not 3 strikes you're out, but let's try to get to first base on balls, and balls alone. At the Manic Kingdom, of course, we'll have all sorts of attractions, such as Slumland, with hot and cold running criminals. Visit Slumland, and right next door, Criminal World, where criminals learn how to be criminals. And, you know, I'm thinking maybe instead of putting elderly people in old age homes and convicts in prisons, maybe we should just make it the other way around. Because, you know, some of these prisons are luxury camps, and a great many of these old age homes are snake pits, and so, you know, that would satisfy a great many people. I mean, the way things are going, there's going to be more criminals than old people, believe it or not. It's kind of hard to believe. In the Manic Kingdom, we don't have political parties. We have the Committee of Unconcerned Citizens. Our motto is Politikverdrossenheit, and basically our politics are the politics of what we don't care about. And so for the first time on any stage, the politics of what I don't care about. I don't care about the PLO in Israel. I don't care about the end of minority rule in South Africa. I don't care about the antics of Yeltsin and Zhirinovsky in Russia, or the Commonwealth of Independent States, or whatever they're going to call it next year. I don't care about peace in Cambodia. I don't care about the United Kingdom and the Northern Ireland peace accords. I don't care about the UN Human Rights Commission. I don't care about the GATT agreement. I don't care about the Angolan Civil War. I don't care about China repossessing Hong Kong in 1997. I don't care about corrupt Italian politicians. I don't care about North Korean nuclear devices, the war in Bosnia, NAFTA, Japanese politics, ID'd in Somalia, the Indian earthquake, Guatemalan coups, Nicaraguan coups, Burundi imbroglios. I don't care about any of that stuff. I don't care about the productiveness of American industry. I don't care about who wins the Nobel Prize. I don't care about healthcare, airlines, the nuclear family, nuclear experiments, the environment, energy conservation, tourists getting shot at in Florida, rip-off charities, or puttering around the house in my spare time. I don't care about any of those things. I don't care if Kim Il-sung wants his Barmy. And I don't care about anti-abortionists who say that abortion is wrong unless it endangers the lives of the mothers. And yet, if the mothers go to get illegal abortions, then their lives will also be most surely endangered. So, of course, that makes no sense at all. I don't care about the war on poverty, and I think we should have a war on poetry. And instead of having poetry readings, I think we should have poverty readings, which is what they are anyway. And get this, I don't want to go on a diet. I'm sick of eating margarine, yogurt, dried fruit, salt-free popcorn, and fat-free cheese melted over English muffins. And I'm sick of washing it all down with flavored seltzers. What I want are slabs of butter fat. I want to drop ice-cold scoops of high-fat frozen desserts into my greasy gullet. I want to cram chips and root beer and pork chops and steak down my insatiable maw. I want a real bread and butter sandwich. A piece of bread between 2 slices of butter. Because I want to live life in the 90s, the 1890s. Because I'm the wrong hero. I sleep with my glasses on so I can watch you suffer in my dreams. And I'm angry because there is not enough imagination in the world. Because the capital of Tunisia is Tunis. The capital of Algeria is Algiers. The capital of Kuwait, don't go out that back door because, don't go out that way because that door is like permanently shut. Please, thank you. I'm glad I caught you just in time. We opened that door, and then when we tried to shut it, it took like 15 minutes because it's all warped and stuff. Not unlike myself. Anyway, yes, there's not enough imagination in the world. All of these world capitals with unimaginative names like Panama City, Guatemala City, El Salvador, San Salvador, Brazil, Brasilia, Kuwait City, Algeria, Algiers, Oklahoma City, Indiana, Indianapolis. What if the capital of the United States were Usopolis or United States City? How do you suppose that would sound to people who depend on us for the products of our imagination? You know, they say an apple a day keeps the doctor away. Well, so does a hand grenade. They say that a carrot improves your vision at night. Well, so does a hand grenade. They say that an apple cleans your teeth. Well, so does a hand grenade. An apple a day keeps the doctor away. Would a doctor-flavored air freshener keep apples away?
How's it going?
Hey, pretty good. Good to see you again. Mighty glad to see you.
And how's this show coming along for you?
Well, as you can see, we've had record crowds, and you see these chairs? They're not really chairs. They're Cherokees, because Indians are masters of disguise. So, yeah, I just saw Geronimo. You know what I like to do?
What?
I like to go to Weight Watchers meetings and leave chocolate-flavored farts in the alcove. I like to go to supermarkets and put Jenny Craig stickers on the cheesecakes. I want to do a sequel to Malcolm X. It would be called Malcolm YZ. Because I don't know. I think it's time, you know. What would it be about? Louis Farrakhan, on the one hand, getting Malcolm X's followers, and at the other hand, denying that he ever had anything to do with assassinating him.
You know what we should do? I just thought something when you said that. I'm going to think of doing exactly the opposite thing of Malcolm X.
What's
You know,
that?
But instead of a guy fighting for black people's rights,
Yeah.
a guy fighting for white people's rights.
Oh my God. Well, that's David Duke, I guess. I don't know. Louisiana.
It wasn't Adolf Hitler.
Oh, well, no, he was just fighting for Germans' rights. And, yeah, what a guy. What a guy. You could never have a movie about David Duke, could you? I mean, unless it were like, you know, from the point of view of Malcolm X. David Duke has been brutalizing our people for the past 350 years, and it has got to stop. I like Malcolm X. I have a whole record of his speeches and stuff. And I love the way he talks, especially the way he says the word brutalize. You know, it's sort of like, he doesn't just like say brutalize, he goes brutalize. You know, it's like 15 syllables, and it's really wonderful. I mean, the guy was a great rhetorician.
Sounds like he's singing, huh?
Yeah, almost, you know. Because, you know, I like Boston. You know, I wouldn't want to live anywhere else. I wouldn't want to live in Texas and be shot at by xenophobic cowboys with spittoons on the fronts of their pickup trucks. And I wouldn't want to live in Florida because I'd have to clean off my ATM card every time I used it because there's so much Coke in the machine, you know, that it gets clogged up. And I don't mean Coca-Cola either. I don't want to live in any state where the motto is snort the 20, you know? That's not for me. And California is pretty nice if you happen to be an avocado. And I don't think I want to live in the Midwest because what are the 3 big tourist attractions in the Midwest? Ghost towns, basketball, and corn. And that's not for me. And I'm not sure I want to live in Rhode Island. I don't want to live in any state which doesn't have its own page in the road atlas, okay? It's always stuck up there with Connecticut. That's not fair. I don't care how small it is. Delaware has its own page. Rhode Island should have its own page too. It's just not fair. I don't like New England, you know, weather because why go see fall foliage when I can just wither on the vine right here at home? Huh? So, that's my motto. Well, I'm the wrong hero, and you guys are swell. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. And this concludes today's presentation of the Manic Kingdom. But before it does, I do have to put in a word for our sponsor. Malt liquor, pancake syrup, chocolate-covered laxatives, canned cream corn, oven cleaner, cling peaches and heavy syrup, and sugar-free Jell-O in a drum. Now, the next time, wait a minute, folks, I gotta say just one word about this fine product. The next time you have a big party and there's like all sorts of people there, parents with their kids, and you know, and the old folks, you want to have something for everybody, and that's why you have got to have malt liquor, pancake syrup, chocolate-covered laxatives, canned cream corn, oven cleaner, clear peaches and heavy syrup, sugar-free Jell-O in a drum. Kids ask for it by name. They say, Mom, can we have some more of that malt liquor, pancake syrup, chocolate-covered laxative, canned cream corn, oven cleaner, clean peaches and heavy syrup, and sugar-free Jell-O in a drum? And Mom will say, sure kids, sure you can have some more of that malt liquor, pancake syrup, chocolate-covered laxatives, canned cream corn, oven cleaner, clean peaches and heavy syrup, and sugar-free Jell-O in a drum. It's good for you. It's got all those good ingredients. It's got oven cleaner to provide a little bit of extra punch. It's got the chocolate-covered laxative in case you're irregular. It's got malt liquor, you know, just a little bit though, just to warm your tummy up on those cold nights. And it's got all that great, good, groovy stuff. And the canned clean peaches and heavy syrup, they don't have an expiration date on the can, so you know they're good. And so, this is The Wrong Hero. Thank you for entering the Magic Kingdom for this week, and we'll be back next week with the conclusion of this presentation entitled The Manic Kingdom.
This is March 2nd. Yes, and I am at the Middle East Bakery speaking with Francis DiMenno about his involvement in the local music scene. And this is interview number 11.
Well, where do we start?
Okay, well, I thought I'd have some questions prepared. I don't always have questions prepared, but tonight I thought it might be important. My first couple of questions have to do with the Middle East in particular. And my first question is, what distinguishes the Middle East from other live music clubs in the Boston area?
Well, the Middle East is extremely eclectic. And, eclectic is a word that's frequently over-bandied about in Boston in particular.
Okay.
But for us, what eclectic means is that they don't necessarily consider themselves a target market for any particular type of music. You can see anything at all here, from Arabic music, various types of ethnic music, jazz, rock and roll, you name it. Avant-garde,
electronic music. It runs the gamut. They put on rock operas and even theatrical productions from time to time, spoken word performances. So there's really no limit. They don't consider this a place that's devoted specifically to rock and roll per se, and they never have. From the very earliest beginnings of the Middle East, which were, I believe, in the 70s, they started out doing Arabic music, and they did that for many years and nothing else. Eventually, they got involved with Billy Ruane by way of Roger Miller.
Okay.
And Billy Ruane began booking rock and roll acts. And in addition, they had started booking Latin American music. There was a band called Flor de Caña, which would play here every Wednesday night in 1988. From the rock and roll on Tuesday nights, it was a short step to beginning to offer jazz music. And before too very long, they decided to also start a blues jam and an open mic. Originally, the blues jam was on Thursday, the open mic was on Wednesday night, and then there was a rock bill on Tuesday nights exclusively, with the open mic and the rock acts on Wednesday. So they, or occasionally, well, it's very convoluted, but it started out with rock on Tuesdays and Latin music on Wednesdays, and I believe they eventually started putting rock in on Fridays.
Okay.
But then they had Arabic music on, no, I'm sorry, they had rock music on Thursdays, Arabic music on Fridays, Greek music on Saturdays, and Sundays and Mondays were for jazz. Well, now the Arabic music has more or less shriveled to a Wednesday night slot in the
Belly
bakery.
dancing performance.
The belly dancing.
Yes.
And they don't have the Greek music anymore, nor do they feature a Latin night every week, as at one time they did. It's gone through a lot of different booking agents, and there's been quite a bit of a shift in the personnel as well. And it's grown, if not arithmetically, perhaps you might say exponentially, from what I would consider its beginnings to be in early 1988. I believe January 29th, 1988 was the first rock bill that was booked by an outside booking agent.
Other than Billy Ruane?
No, with Billy, that was Billy Ruane.
Okay.
And, for the first 6 months or so, it was just Tuesday nights in 1988. Eventually, they decided to add a Latin night, and that's where I came in. I was the door person on Wednesday nights for about 2 years.
Oh, I see.
Until I got involved with, I also was concurrently involved with the open mic and the blues jam. And I was doing, so I was pretty much had my finger in virtually every pie, and I was reviewing the shows on Tuesday nights for the Noise. So I became an employee here in like June, July 1988.
Okay.
And Billy Ruane booked the place until I believe it was October of 1989.
Okay.
And they got this fellow Chris Rich in, and he had a sort of what I prefer to refer to as an interregnum of about 8 months. In about mid-1990, he was replaced by Martin Doyle.
Okay.
And in about mid-1992, just about the time that the downstairs opened up, or was preparing to open up, Martin Doyle decided to leave and start his own club called the Causeway in Boston, and that's when they got Dave.
I see.
Dave Sheehan and Chris Porter. Dave Sheehan books the upstairs, Chris Porter books the downstairs.
Okay. That's something I am aware of. So Dave Sheehan has only been here since the summer of '92.
Yeah.
Okay.
But he's had a finger in the music scene. Not so much Dave per se as Chris Porter.
Yes.
Chris Porter used to book Bunratty's.
Okay.
See, a lot of the people here who had been hired to do booking had some experience or other in booking prior to being hired. Billy Ruane had booked shows as early as 1983 at places like the Channel, but he wasn't their regular booker. He was somebody that some of the more avant-garde bands would approach, or even some of the less successful, somewhat more mainstream bands, such as, for instance, Moving Targets, or there was this band out of Ohio, Human Switchboard.
Okay.
People like them would approach Billy, or even who's that woman singer, Rachel Sweet.
Okay.
He would book them, and act similar to that.
Was he a booking agent by trade?
No, he got involved in it because he was very much interested in music from the time I first met him, which I think was in 1977.
Okay.
He was attending the Harvard Extension School, and I was an undergraduate at Harvard.
Okay.
And he just had this incredible collection of music.
Indie
Avant-garde
rock and roll.
jazz. Oh no, far from simply restricting himself to that.
Okay.
He had the first Perubu EP, and he had all this really obscure stuff. He had the first Buzzcocks singles. He even had the Spiral Scratch EP, which back in '77 nobody had ever heard of. He knew about the Sex Pistols a good 6 months before anybody else. He was always really on top of the indie scene, even in its nascent period. But what he really had a wide-ranging expertise in was jazz. He had
Okay.
Ornette Coleman live at the Stockholm Golden Circle Volumes 1 and 2. All these fabulously rare jazz albums. Olé by John Coltrane, which isn't particularly rare, but it's somewhat obscure unless you're really well grounded in jazz music. Miles Davis, Birth of the Cool. Those are just like the basic things in any jazz course that they would teach you. But he not only had that, but all the other stuff too.
Okay.
This is just some of the things he's turned me on to that I'm doing.
He obviously, Wayne obviously seems to have very eclectic taste. Did he gain his reputation? Did he initially gain his reputation as being a collector of this very obscure music?
Yes, actually. Well, among other things, he was involved in all sorts of things besides just collecting music. People I hung out with always regarded him as, I guess you'd say, something of a wunderkind. He wrote a 300-page paper on Emerson. The assignment was like 20 pages, and he spent like 6 months and almost got thrown out of school because he obsessed on this topic. I don't know if it's 300, it might have been 200, but whatever it was, Billy would always do it 110%. And that included collecting jazz music. When he decided to get into acting, he would just like throw himself into it and do a whole bunch of plays, not just one play at a time, but he'd appear concurrently.
Okay. How did he initially become affiliated with the Middle East?
Well, now, legend has it that Roger Miller had his father used to give him these birthday parties every year, I believe in September, and I've been to a few of them. One of them was at that Hungarian restaurant in Boston.
Cafe Budapest?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay.
And he always hung out with musical people like Pat McGrath, who used to be in Condo Pygmies, and now he's in the Wheelers and Dealers. And Roger Miller, who of course has a long and distinguished resume.
Mission of Burma.
Mission of Burma.
Now he's playing jazz music.
Yes, now he's a solo jazz performer, a keyboard player. And it was Roger and Sue Miller who saw this place and realized what a potential it had. TT the Bears had opened in like 1984 as a music club. It was starting to get off the ground in early '85, as I recall. And back in '85, there weren't really an awful lot of places where a band could play because places were closing down right and left. Johnny D's in Alston was in its declining days, although I don't think anybody realized it then. And the Channel was still around, although eventually they too would follow in the path of Johnny D's. There was the Rat. Chet's Last Call too was to go out of business in about a year or so.
Okay.
So '85 was really a very pivotal year in the history of Boston rock and roll. And TT's was sort of positioned to exploit it. I don't mean that in a bad way, but to take advantage of the emerging gap in clubs to play in the metro Boston area. There was Jack's down the street on Mass Ave, but that burned down around about the time of 1985. In fact, one of the first and fondest memories not one of the first, but certainly one of the fondest memories I have of Billy is when he was booking bands into Jack's in 1983. I would go and do reviews of them for some Providence paper I was affiliated with called The Local, and he had all the bands in town that nobody else really wanted to deal with. The ones that weren't mainstream and slick and commercial, like Rough Mix 3 and Jaxed and Moving Targets and Mr. Butch and the Holy Men.
Okay.
He would book them in the Jax, and Jax was a pretty easygoing place. But eventually, as I said, that closed down. So in '85, we have all of these clubs that are like
beginning to like form this transitional phase between either opening up or shutting down for good. And TT's sort of headed it. They spearheaded it, and from '85 to about '87, they were the only thing going on in Central Square, other than Green Street.
I've heard of that place, but I've never been there.
Yeah. There was Green Street. There was the 1316, the Charlie's Tap, actually, we should call it.
Okay.
Not Green. It's a distinguished from Green Street Station. There's Charlie's Tap on Green Street, right around the corner from here. There was the 1369 Jazz Club in Inman Square, and it was Night Stage, which prior to being called Night Stage had been known as the Club. Or, no, actually, yeah, it was called the Club, not to be confused with Club 3 up in Somerville.
Right, but I spoke to a person a couple of weeks ago who told me about that particular venue, and he said, I guess he had been there a couple of times, and maybe he was a manager. He may have managed a band back in the mid-'80s. He used to manage Slapshot.
Slapshot, yeah.
Yep, I guess he got them booked at the Club.
Right, and Billy also did bookings at the Club. He booked Moving Targets again.
Okay.
And various other bands in that sphere of. You really have to call it nascent indie music because
Sure.
You had Husker Du, you had the Minutemen, you had the Replacements, and they sort of anchored that whole movement. But there wasn't really much of an independent scene going on in Boston with people making recordings and stuff. I mean, there were maybe about 24 bands would do so, but basically recordings were made by, Human Sexual Response, for instance, would be an example of a mainstream band who committed themselves to vinyl, and of course Mission of Burma. Anyway, I'm really sort of going too fast, but getting back to '85. Well, there was TT's and the other bands, the other clubs, but it was in '87 that Roger Miller saw the Club, in September '87.
Okay.
And Billy had his birthday party there, and also at TT the Bears. Now, the Middle East, when it first started out, didn't really have much of a setup. It had like 2 mics, a primitive 8-switch console mixer.
Okay.
And
So when was this?
This would be in September of '87, actually, before they even started booking rock and roll bands.
And you're referring to the back room?
Yeah, they had a special event there. It was Billy's birthday.
Then that was the first time rock and roll was ever booked at this club?
Well, I wouldn't want to go on record as saying that because I don't know it for a fact, but it was certainly the start of a regular rock booking, although nobody really realized it at the time. Billy talked to Nabil and Joseph Sater, who run this place, and he said, "Hey, why don't you let me try booking rock and roll acts here on Tuesday nights? Because Tuesdays are pretty slow in rock and roll. Generally, it's Friday and Saturday nights, and some Thursdays, which are the big draw nights.
Sure.
And like I said, for the longest time, they didn't have rock and roll in here. And Friday and Saturday nights, they had Greek and Arabic music. By the time 1989 rolled around, the Middle East had begun booking all sorts of bands. They had a different act every night of the week.
Okay.
They might be closed Monday nights occasionally if they couldn't find a suitable jazz band. But in the course of about a year, they had built this place up to be what it is today, basically, although in somewhat embryonic form.
From 1988 to 1989.
Yeah, those are the big growth years. And that's when, 87 was when places like Chet's and in 88, 1369 Club closed down.
Okay.
So there was a real void for, and TT's had begun offering music which was more like what a professional club in Boston like the Paradise would offer, back when the Paradise still did rock and roll on a regular basis. And even as late as '88 they did. Of course, they became a comedy room, and then they closed down eventually.
No.
Paradise.
Okay. But now they're open again.
I believe so.
Yes, they are. I don't know how long they were closed for, but I guess they have reopened. And I went to see Bim Scala Bim there back in February of last year, March of last year, and I guess the club is primarily booked by the Don Law Agency now.
Yes.
It's partly owned by the Lions Corporation, so it's fallen into that whole corporate monopoly that that exists on Lansdowne Street with all the Lions-owned clubs, all of which are booked by the Don Law Agency.
I saw the Clash in 1978 at the Orpheum, and I remember them saying, "Who's Don Law? Bring Don Law down here. I want to talk to Don Law. People what's paid money for their seats ought to have the right to dance," because the bouncers were keeping people from getting up and dancing to the Clash and stuff.
Oh,
They
wow.
were doing some of their working class camaraderie thing. And I remember there was a band, it might have been the Count or someone like that. He had a song called Dawn of the Dead, and he was referring to Don Law.
Really?
So Don Law has always been something of a thorn in the side of individuals who wanted, to just not be involved with that whole corporate schmear.
My impression is, and I mean, I've only been observing this situation for a relatively short period of time, but I sense that Don Law and his agency, they're almost portrayed as being like, it's almost like good versus evil in terms of how bands get booked in Boston, and most of the people who patronize this club, or those people I've spoken to, have expressed very negative feelings about Don Law and his agency, and it's almost as if they mystify him,
Right.
and make him out to be some kind of black-hearted villain,
He's sort of like the Goldstein that was demonized in in 1984. In 1984, his Big Brother, and they were always putting up this straw man called Goldstein, who was the scapegoat.
Okay.
Well, the thing is, Don Law, you might say that part of the reason people perceive him in such a negative way is that they don't like his business practices. Of course, they probably don't like any business practices. I don't think he's any more unscrupulous than any other businessman, if in fact he's unscrupulous at all.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, there's Ron.
Hey,
how you doing?
Francis, how are you doing?
Ron Shadows Mursky.
Yes, right.
Ron here books the
Hi.
bakery.
Hi, how you doing?
How you doing?
My name's Lee.
Lee, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Ron is certainly somebody you ought to talk to, too. He's been booking
Oh, yeah?
the bakery here for the last year or
I
so.
recognize your name. Yeah.
Are you a musician?
I'm doing my master's thesis on basically doing my master's thesis on this club,
Oh, wow.
and so
Okay.
I have seen your name on the calendar, and I realize
Sure,
you
I'd be
do book.
willing to talk to you sometime.
That would be great.
Yeah.
Right?
I'm sure I can tell you a few things.
Your number's
or
posted
two.
right over there, isn't it?
Yeah, actually, you can just call me up. Here, I'll give you a
Alright.
card, though.
So anyway, Don Law, he's not, and he certainly isn't the only one who has brought big business practices to Boston. It seems like he's been around forever. From what I hear, he's been around since the early '70s, maybe even earlier than that.
Okay.
I guess you might say he was sort of the Bill Graham of Boston, if you wanted to put that positive a light on
Who was
his
Bill Graham?
contribution. He was the fellow who booked the bands like the Jefferson Airplane into in San Francisco.
Oh,
He had all those
okay.
clubs, Fillmore West, and he opened the Fillmore East in New York. But his day was years and years ago. He's not really around much anymore.
Did he have a positive reputation among the
He did.
hippie culture of the
well,
time?
He did and he didn't. Business practices are inimical to the whole hippie philosophy.
And to the bohemian philosophy too. Anything that has to do with legitimate art is antithetical, is averse to any kind of corporate practices.
Right. So you can sort of chalk up the enmity that people have towards Don Law to that sort of generational divide and a philosophical divide. But like I said, I don't think he's any more unscrupulous than anybody else. But then again, I haven't been burned by him, so I don't know.
Right, and it seems like a logical assessment, but it's just interesting to note how people portray him, how people see him in such a bad light,
Well, you might chalk a little bit of it up to envy. I mean, if he were managing them, then they probably wouldn't. They'd probably, they'd be kissing his ass.
Oh, the degree of influence he has is astonishing, you know, and I'm sure a lot of it has to do with, a lot of it has to do with bad feelings. You know, if you're involved in a band that can't get booked at Club Axis or Bill's Bar or whatever, then you're going to blame Don Law, because you're going to think that somehow, some way, Don Law is ultimately responsible.
Well, exclusivity contracts are nothing new in the music business or in the comedy business, for that matter. And so, you know, it basically it's like I'm going to take my ball and go home unless you play the game by my rules. But
Okay.
you're in no position to set the rules because Don Law's there. He's the umpire. He's the pitcher,
Exactly.
and you know he.
No, it's absolutely true.
And he's the commissioner of baseball all in one. I mean, so anyway, enough about Don Law.
Okay.
For God's sake.
But I'm glad, I'm glad we talked about that a little bit, because I was going to ask you what your feelings were regarding that particular situation.
Oh hell! Well, 15 years ago I might have said, "Oh, Don Law sucks," you know. But you know, he's a businessman. You can't expect him to behave any other way. So
And his success speaks for itself.
the thing is, yeah. Well, not only that, but I don't think he's really his stranglehold on the Boston club scene hasn't really stopped places like this from opening up.
No.
You know, he doesn't exert the degree of influence that would make it, impossible for a band to get a booking. If they're determined enough, they can go to one of the smaller clubs, and once they've, proved their mettle, it may take years, and maybe that's why they're so angry. It may take years, but eventually, if you're good at what you do, you don't have to sell out. You just you can make your own way. Look at Bim Scala Bim. I don't think they've made that many compromises along the way, and I've been following them for years. And I know
I
them
just
all
interviewed
personally.
Rick Barry a couple of weeks, last week, as a matter of fact. And you're right. I mean, their persistence is quite evident.
Well, persistence speaks for itself. If you really want to do something badly enough, there's no sense in sitting around and moping about how nobody ever gave you a break. You make your own breaks. I'm sure Don Lawn would grin in agreement with this, but I don't often find myself agreeing with people like Don Law, but hey.
Your reasoning seems to be pretty level-headed, Interestingly enough, Rick also had a very pragmatic view about that whole situation, and he basically said, well, I don't want to spend too much time recapping another interview, but he wasn't ready to come right out and say, well, Don Law is the downfall of the Boston music scene, Don Law is stifling the growth of the scene, and he has a stranglehold on the clubs, so a lot of good bands can't get gigs at decent-sized venues. He wasn't saying that.
Of course, they might not be able to get good gigs at decent-sized salaries, and that may have something to do with Don Law. I mean, if you don't deal with Don Law, then you're probably going to be in poor tone for a while. So, there you have it.
I understand. I'm just going to check my list of questions, because you managed to touch upon a lot of my other questions. I just want to see where we're at. A lot of the questions that I have here are in regard to the history of this particular establishment. So I certainly appreciated your, the account that you just gave me about how the club started and how it developed.
I can give you the issues of the noise in which I've written down this stuff in chronological order and save you a good deal of transcription.
That would be excellent.
Yeah.
I would certainly appreciate
Yeah, I'll
that.
get those for you.
Okay.
But let's commence.
Okay. Let's see. So, this establishment there's always been a restaurant here. This establishment opened up as a restaurant.
In 1971, not at this location. They moved to this location sometime around 72, 73.
Okay.
Initially, it was a very small place. This was a Greek bakery that we're sitting in now. It wasn't
Okay.
the Middle East at all. The downstairs was a bowling alley. That restaurant, which is 2 doors over, wasn't even part of the Middle East per se when they first opened. It was just that back room. And
Oh, you're
nothing
kidding.
else. And then at first they got the restaurant, then they got the bakery, and they got the downstairs.
see.
And then they got offices, which are about 4 doors down, which they're planning to convert into some sort of Galleria type arrangement.
Oh, really? And they're still in the process of renovating that area?
Yes, they
I
are.
see.
So basically, they're making this neighborhood a safe place to live in, which it wasn't necessarily that safe
It's an interesting point.
10 years ago. Before TT's was a rock club. I mean, late at night, I wouldn't say you'd be taking your life into your hands to be walking around here, but it wouldn't necessarily be a good idea if you looked at all vulnerable. There was this place across the street called the Rise Club.
Okay.
In that building over there. And since I've lived here for like about 15 years, I know that every morning, every Saturday morning at like 4 a.m., hundreds of teenagers and such from Roxbury and places like that would come streaming out into the street, and they'd be brawling and there'd be big fist fights and stuff. I mean, it was a very different place. It was sort of like a hangout for gangbangers, and in fact, it still has some remnants of that. Behind that McDonald's, maybe a block or two back, there's a lot of drug dealing going on back there. The police are well aware of it, and they can shoo them away. But there seems to be no way to eradicate it altogether. That McDonald's used to be quite a hangout,
For
from
gang
what
members.
I hear. Yeah, but now it's closed.
As was that club that you just mentioned?
Yeah.
The
but
Rise Club?
Yeah, the Rise Club. But there was good music that came out of there, and people were having a good time. But there's always an element who will cause problems, and it was not that safe a neighborhood 10 years ago. The Rise Club eventually closed down. I guess they violated fire laws. Who knows? You see, I wasn't there. I didn't know a thing about it.
Okay.
But,
So the restaurant opened up at this location in 72.
Something like that, yeah. 71, 72. I have the exact dates written down.
Okay. Who were the original owners?
I'm not 100% certain of this, but I believe that Emile DuPont is actually the owner of record, and the Bill and Joseph sort of. They're the owner-operators, but they don't own the property.
They're proprietors?
They're the proprietors. They own the fixtures. They've done all the renovation. If they ever sold this place, I suppose, they would sell the actual physical plant with all of the add-ons that they've put into it. But they would, it would be done through Emile DuPont, since I believe he actually owns this place.
Okay.
I've seen him once. He's
Okay.
a dentist.
Really? And he has always owned this place? He's always been the owner?
As far as I know.
But you don't, he's
he
not
rents
involved in the music scene in any way, shape, or form?
No. He rents this place to them.
see.
They have to pay quite a hefty rent, I'm sure.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I hope that this is still the case. I don't think they've actually bought this place and own it free. As far as it was back in '88, they've never corrected me, and I don't believe they've bought it in the interim. It was Emile DuPont.
Okay. They're renting the place, so Joseph and Neville aren't in a position to sell to a prospective buyer?
Oh yeah, they own all the fixtures and stuff. They could sell it, sure, but they couldn't sell the land.
Oh, okay.
Because it's not theirs. They just rent it.
Okay, I think I understand the distinction. Have Joseph and Neville been involved with this establishment since it first opened?
Oh yeah.
I see. That's important to note because I didn't realize. I actually thought that Joseph and Neville were currently the owners of record.
We can ask her. She might know. They don't make a big deal about it, but apparently, yes, he's the owner of record.
Okay.
So,
I see.
but they've occupied this place so long. It's hard to imagine them ever selling it.
Oh,
They
absolutely.
might pass it down to some member of their family. So. And I also can't imagine he charges them a great deal.
It's interesting.
They probably have a long-term lease with him.
Okay.
And they've probably had one for quite some time.
Okay. Now, this place has always featured Arabic music, and that would include belly dancing as well.
Yes.
Right from the very beginning.
Right. The Satyrs have, they're interested in music. They come from this part of Beirut called the Hamra.
Okay.
One of them attended American University there, I believe. And the Hamra was sort of like, I don't know, I haven't been to Europe, but I sort of pictured like the left bank or Berliner Platz or something. You know, you can see just about anything there if you wanted to. You can see plays, musical performances, and whatnot. And they've sort of upheld that tradition of an eclectic place for basically what you'd call bohemians to hang out.
That's really interesting, and it also explains a lot, you know, about why they're involved in this particular kind of venue. Now, did they have belly dancing every night of the week here?
Oh no, I don't think they had it every night. They probably had it like once or twice a week.
Okay.
Probably on the weekends, actually. I think that's why it stayed that way for so long, because it was a tradition, and they were very loath to disturb it. You know, they had a constituency. In other words, Arabic people and Greek people would come here. You know, I've been here for Greek nights. That place was packed. There'd be 110 people in that room.
In that back room?
Yeah, and
Okay.
that's how many it holds. I don't know how they fit that many people in there with chairs and tables, but they did.
Because it was dining.
You literally couldn't move. You know, I mean, it would be very difficult for you to get from one end of the place to the other.
Okay.
And you know, they'd throw dollar bills at the belly dancers, and they'd get up on stage and they'd throw dollar bills around, and it's a traditional thing. Now, there's not so much of that nowadays, but there are places up North Cambridge. There's another Arabic place where they have belly dancing like that.
Okay.
So it's not as though this was ever the only place that had belly dancing in the whole area.
I was just going to say, I'm not aware of any other place that features belly dancing. So I think the Middle East is unique just from that standpoint.
No, there's a place. Oh, you know, it's floating in my head, and I can't quite remember the name of it. Howdy. Hey guys, what's the name of that other Arabic restaurant up on Mass Ave? You know the one I mean. Which one? The big one. The one near the Avarov, yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. In Porter Square.
Yeah.
I know where that is.
Yeah, I believe they have belly dancing.
Oh, okay.
So no, it's not as though they occupied a unique market niche in any way. But for Cambridge, well, even for this area of Cambridge, they certainly did.
Sure. And I mean, coming from where I come from the South Shore. So, I mean, obviously, there's no sense in comparing the culture down there with the culture in the Boston area. But I mean, I couldn't begin to think of any places that featured belly dancing. You know, when I first found out about the Middle East, I was like, oh, no, you've got all these different kinds of music every night of the week, and they have belly dancing. I haven't even seen the belly dancing here.
Come here on Wednesday night. Stick around. I mean,
oh yeah,
they'll have it tonight. Yeah.
Tonight's the night. Let's see. Yeah. Now, this issue of the noise that you're talking about, where you list the development of the
Middle East.
It's the development of the Middle East. Okay,
Yeah.
so you have the date of when the Greek
all that
bakery was bought out, and
Pretty much, yeah.
all right. Well, I won't. I probably shouldn't belabor you with too many questions about. You listed. You mentioned September of '87 as being the first birthday party bash.
Yeah.
That happened at this club. So it was a private party in the back room. Billy asked a couple of bands to play.
Yeah, basically.
Remember which bands played?
Offhand, no.
Okay.
But I'm sure one of them was something with Roger Miller in it.
Okay.
And he's always had very eclectic tastes in rock and roll. He favored bands which you wouldn't at first. He was sort of like a trendsetter, a tastemaker to a certain degree. Although his influence wasn't that wide among the general public until he started booking this club.
Okay.
But booking the club, in a sense, was his way of exposing the general public to artists he felt were deserving of more exposure. That whole thing I went through with all the clubs closing down and the new ones taking their place. That, in part, was what provided him with the impetus to begin booking bands into the Middle East, because I guess he perceived that there wasn't really a place like Chet's Last Call or Jack's where you could see some struggling young band do their first show ever.
Okay.
who might be really good or who might not, but at least it was something different from the same 12 or 24 bands.
Back in 87, 88, there weren't places like that anymore?
There weren't that many.
Okay.
There was TT's, there was Bunratty's, there was The Rat, and that was about it.
Okay.
All the other places had shut down or weren't offering that as much, or to the degree which Billy felt they should. Now, he basically booked a show every Tuesday, and that was all well and good. He could easily find 4 bands, a week. But then he started booking Thursdays as well.
Okay.
And that was 8 bands a week. The Wednesdays were pretty much the same 2 or 3 Latin American folk music type bands.
Okay.
So that wasn't much of a strain on his booking prowess.
How soon after this first birthday party did he ask Nabil and Joseph to let him book the club on Tuesday nights?
That is shrouded in mystery, but I suspect it was right away.
Okay.
So it was in development from September until the beginning of January. There was like 3 months prep time where, he rounded up all this stuff. Basically, he had to hire a sound man. He had to get a door person. Now,
Okay.
I should say there were basically 3. There was a triumvirate who started this place. There was Billy Ruane, this fellow named Joey Cagnoli, who goes by the name of Joe Harvard, who lives in Cincinnati now.
Okay.
Who also went to Harvard, and Skeggy Kendall, who was in Lifeboat back in '85, and then the Brothers Kendall, and now he's got a new band, which you could probably find out the name of, but I'm not sure of what it is. Skeggy, he floats in and out of here. Joey's in Cincinnati now. And then there's Billy. And Billy, we don't see much of Billy, but he lives right down the street.
Okay.
And I should also mention that Jennifer Cares, who is Miles Cares' daughter, and Miles Cares is one of the proprietors, along with Bonnie Boulay, of TT the Bears. So nobody gets in this business without knowing somebody or having had some experience or other. Jennifer Cares was like the anchor of this place. Those 3 guys, they were responsible for rounding up the bands and talking to them as fellow musicians, particularly Joey and Skeggy. Billy, of course, not being a musician, but more like the money man.
Okay.
But Jennifer Cares was the one who basically ran the door, and it's very important to have a good door person, and she was the best. She had already done it for at least, I think 2 or 3 years over at TT the Bears, so she knew her business. Because when you first start a club like this, I'd say a good 20% of the patrons are going to want to get in for free for one reason or another.
Okay.
They're affiliated with the band. I can run down a whole list, but I don't think it would be profitable. But there's any of a number of reasons why people think they're entitled to see the show for free. Some of them having to do with the fact that they're musicians and don't have any money. They're friends of the musicians. They're friends of the people who work here. They're friends of the owners. It's always like one hand washes the other.
Sure.
But Jennifer wouldn't put up with any of that. She knew who was legitimately entitled to get in for free, who was media, and who was just saying they were media. So she was. The Boston Globe did an article on Billy and Jennifer. I believe it was probably sometime between February, March, April, somewhere in there.
Okay.
And quite rightfully, she and Billy did the article because they were really they ran the place.
Okay.
Skeggy and Joey sort of gave the place its patina of hip musicians.
Because of people they knew.
Yeah, because of people they knew.
So they kind of functioned as booking managers / office managers /
Well, they didn't really do much office work as far as I could tell. But yeah, they did do some booking.
Okay.
Eventually, Joey was to do a Wednesday night before he left for Cincinnati.
Okay.
Back in 1990, 91, actually.
So by '88, there was a back room. Was there a restaurant as well?
There was the restaurant back room in '88. They began working on the bakery, although it was much smaller than what you see now. They bought out the bakery sometime in '89, and then renovations for that took a while. They didn't really start offering anything in the way of music back here until January of 1991, as far as I remember.
In this room?
Yeah, it
Okay.
might have been a little sooner than that, but I remember it pretty well because I was starting to do the televised open mics back then. I did a couple of them in the bakery, just to see how it would fit, but it wasn't really intended for a general audience, so I felt it would be better just to hang on to, I used to do Wednesday nights. Before the evening event, we had the open mic from like 6 to 7:30.
Oh, okay.
Eventually that was switched to 7 to 8:30. And eventually it was switched over to Saturdays, where it now remains from 1 until about 3 in the afternoon.
Yeah.
So in '88, we could say, without stretching the truth whatsoever, that it was Billy Ruane, Joe Harvard, Skeggy Kendall. Skeggy and Joey became less and less involved with the club starting in around '89, and it was pretty much Billy's show for quite a while. And Billy went until about 1990. I hope I didn't say '89 before. It was, as I recall now, it was actually October of 1990 that he no longer booked the place.
Okay.
And after which point Chris Rich took over from October. He was Billy's assistant by then.
Oh, by 1990.
Yeah, certainly by 1990. And I think around the beginning of '90 he was probably helping Billy with some of the booking decisions, particularly I think the jazz. Billy had a jazz booker, but Chris just helped out in general. Billy didn't have much of an office staff. He would get the door people and even the sound people to do the mailings and stuff. He had this mania for mailing lists, and I remember many a time we'd stay up until very late doing the mailings, and then he would send somebody by cab over to the Boston post office at South Station, because the Cambridge post office is notorious for its inefficiency.
Oh, okay.
And it was always like 2 days before the actual event, 3 or 4 days before, so it had to go out by midnight.
On that day.
On that very day. And
I
so
see.
It was always a high pressure situation.
So he was mailing to regular patrons of the club to keep them informed.
The mailing list, the monstrous mailing list. I think it had about 1,000 people on it by the end, but well, when Billy let go of the club fixtures and doing the club, he passed it along to Chris Rich. Now Chris Rich was intellectually quite capable of handling this complex task.
Okay.
But perhaps personality-wise, he wasn't the best person to do it. Some would say he was abrasive. Others would say that he was simply a person who didn't like to deal with bullshit. And it wasn't 3 strikes you're out with him. It was 1 strike and forget you. So as I recall, he had some of the most eclectic bookings that this place has ever had.
Really?
Even more eclectic than what Billy managed. He would get these like go-nowhere bands that might have had 1 album on an independent label, and he'd bring them in here, like from Baltimore. I don't think he's ever had the Afghan Wigs here, but that would be an example of the type of band he might have gotten into this place.
Okay.
Geez, I just wish I could remember. Of course, I did videotape quite a few of them. So Chris pretty much ran the operation until mid 1991.
Okay.
And then Martin Doyle took over, and he had it for about a year or so, maybe a little more than a year. Martin Doyle, he's not very old. He's like now he's about maybe 25 or 26, but he's just he was incredibly smart and incredibly astute, and he knew how to manage people, and he knew who was deserving and who wasn't, and he would reward them appropriately or not, depending on that. And he never minded people calling him up, and pestering him for gigs. He didn't consider that to be
a burden.
Okay. He considered it to be a necessity for the bands to make themselves known to him.
Sure.
I think that's less the case with Dave Sheehan. I think Dave would rather deal with press kits and whatnot and demo tapes.
And don't call us, we'll call you.
Well, he's a little more like that, not exclusively, not strictly. Yeah, I think Dave likes to network a little more, and Martin was more into giving some unknown a shot, at doing the club.
Okay. But that was a reputation that Billy Ruane initially established for the club. My feeling is that Billy Ruane established a reputation for this club that involved that had to do with booking a very wide variety of entertainment, and also taking, being willing to book unknown bands that had never played anywhere before. I mean, was that his function? Was that his ambition?
I don't think he would book a local unknown who had never played anywhere, who he didn't know about.
Okay.
Through some way or other, either by reputation or having heard a demo. But in fact, I don't think any booking agent in town has ever operated like that. Occasionally, Chris Rich would, in fact, say to somebody, "Well, why don't you play here?" Actually, maybe I emphasize Chris Rich's role only because he gave me quite a bit of latitude personally to do booking myself.
Oh, really?
Well, I mean, sometimes that's how I would go. I'd hear a demo and I'd say, "We really ought to get this guy, Chris," and Chris would say, "Okay," and he'd do it. Whereas
Okay.
with Billy, it would be more of, "Well, let me hear the demo." Billy was more. It was more like show me with Billy.
Oh, I see. So it's not like he's gonna book a band on nothing but a phone call.
No, he wouldn't do that.
Right, okay.
In fact, Billy did a lot of legwork. He would go to different clubs and he would scout bands. And he had been scouting bands, informally and formally for like 10 years. So he knew. He started out knowing music. That's a big plus. Plus, he knew the local scene inside out. Plus, he also knew the national scene. Not inside out, but pretty well.
How did he get to know the national scene?
Well, he bought a lot of records. He listened to radio a lot. And like I said, he did his footwork. He would go to various clubs and see some band from, say, Baltimore or New York City or whatnot. And he'd book them in here.
So he was a real music consumer.
He was,
Yeah.
yes. And Chris somewhat less so, but he picked up a lot of information from Billy, and he was living in Billy's apartment, so he had
I see.
access to Billy's collection. And, and also, Chris was willing to listen to the people who were working with him, too.
Okay.
And if somebody he respected said that the band was good and should be booked here, then he would book them. And,
Now, you were booking rock and roll shows while you...
Formally, no. I've only booked one or two here in my entire career.
Okay.
But informally, it was like a network type deal where, I know these people because I listen to a lot of demo tapes because I review demos for the Noise.
Okay.
And I have been for like, at least 5 years, I would think. And, plus records, plus bands, and, I sort of had a finger on the scene, less so now than perhaps back then. Since
I mean, I do realize that you review a lot of local music. I know that's a part of your job as being an associate editor at the Noise. But you're saying to me that it's not. Are you just not reviewing as much as you used to?
Oh, I do the newer bands. I don't do as many of the established bands.
Okay.
I deal with them now at the demo stage. It used to be I would deal with them at the recording stage. But there's plenty of other people on the staff who can do that, so
I see.
I'd rather just stick with this, discovering the new people.
I see.
Because I already know who all the old people are.
Okay.
And it becomes redundant after a while. Also, I do comedy, and I don't really have as much time to devote to going to clubs every night as at one time I might have.
And
So-
you were doing that at one point?
Oh yeah, I was hitting them 3 or 4 nights a week sometimes.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So, Chris Richmond?
His name was Chris Rich.
Chris Rich gave way to Martin Doyle.
Martin Doyle.
Now, by 1988, this club was booking music 5 nights a week, 6 nights a week.
Not until '89.
Okay.
In '88, it was starting to slowly build. It started with Tuesdays. They added Wednesdays sometime in June of '88. And they added Thursdays not too long afterwards. By '89, they were booking Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays. And from the period '89 to '90, they started booking Saturday afternoons, Sundays, although Sundays were always slow and they didn't always book that night. And Mondays, so they had Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday
Okay.
by 1990, plus other, they had other bands as well.
I see.
It was only in about 1991 that they finally started booking Fridays and Saturdays.
Oh, really?
And you look at old schedules,
and find out exactly when this process began coalescing.
Okay.
And I just happen to have a bunch of old schedules.
Well, that's excellent, because I mean, it's certainly something I've been thinking about. You know, should I ask the managers if they keep any old schedules lying around?
I don't keep old schedules per se. What I have are like old copies of the Noise where the schedules are posted.
Oh, I see.
So, you know, they can give you tons of those.
Same thing.
I got a lot of them.
That's excellent.
In fact, if you have a backpack, it might be handy.
Pardon?
I hope you have a backpack, because I'll lay about 30 or 40 of them on you. So
You have them right here, or is that something I
at
can
home,
pick
2
up?
doors down.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I do have my book bag, so I can take whatever you have to offer.
All right. So then there's Martin Doyle, and Martin Doyle was basically from June, July of '91 to close to the end of '92.
Okay.
No, actually, into '93. March, April, May of '93. So Martin was here a year and a half. Dave's been here since about May, June of '93, as I recall. And
But June of 92 or 93? June of
93.
Okay,
June of '93.
That makes sense. And Chris Porter came over here right around the same time.
Yeah, Chris. Well, now Chris was involved with Martin. In fact, Chris was sort of a holdover from the Martin Doyle days.
Oh, okay.
In a sense. Now, I don't know the precise mechanics of that. You probably want to talk to Dave Sheehan about it, or even Chris Porter himself.
I should tell you that I'm going to be speaking with Dave Sheehan later on tonight.
Oh, okay.
I had scheduled my interview with him right after our interviews, because I figured I'd catch everybody on the night that they were all available.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, so
That makes sense.
that would be my plan. What do you know what time it is, by the way?
I'll see.
Checking to see what you answered for my questions regarding the clientele at this club.
Well, now the clientele of a rock club is going to fall into 2 categories. If it's an all-ages place,
Okay.
that allows all-ages patrons, there'll be the 18 to 22-year-olds who are sort of going to college or, you know, just hanging out, and, you know, they treat it as like a social event.
Okay.
And then there's the 22 to 28-year-olds, and they want a place to hang out and have a drink after work and socialize. Anybody who comes to a club like this after the age of 28 is probably really interested in the music, first and foremost. And anybody who's here after the age of 35, well, they probably work here. We don't get very many people who are, you know, in their mid-30s. But they're either musicians themselves or performers of some sort or another, or, you know, they want to see a specific band and not just any old band. You know, you would get a crowd like that for the Roger Miller shows, or cul-de-sac. You know, fine arts, in other words.
Okay.
Or they'll come for the ethnic nights when we used to have them. They come for the reggae jam, which we started about 5 months ago.
Okay.
How the place has changed since 1988? Well, I would have to say that it started out as a very haphazardly organized place, which basically everything was in Billy Ruane's head, and that wasn't necessarily bad because there was a sort of centralized control.
Sure.
But even a genius couldn't possibly book 6 nights a week here for 2 years without starting to unravel a little bit and need assistance, which eventually, you know, he got people to help him. But even in the Chris Rich days, it was still pretty much a one-man operation. It was all, you know, Chris Rich, what he decided. There was no, and then with Martin Doyle, he had people who were definitely his assistants. They were his buffers to a certain degree.
Okay.
They would handle all the administrative stuff, the paperwork. It was also they started running it on a more professional basis. Like bands would sign vouchers, there were guest lists that, you know, were just like definitely written out. A schedule managed to get published on time every month. and it was much less haphazard.
By 1990 or so?
By 1991,
Okay.
92. By the time Martin Doyle came in, he sort of made this place into a real rock club to a certain degree. Before that, it was sort of like somebody's project or something, and less. It wasn't really run along the lines of any other rock club in town back then. And with Martin Doyle, he started to do it along those lines. And with Dave Sheehan, you have the club finally coming into its own as a place which is professionally run and organized. We've got media liaisons now and people who are responsible for, hiring new people. Billy would do all that, and Chris Rich would do all that, and Martin Doyle would at least have something to do with that.
A publicity manager would be one example of a media liaison.
Yeah, definitely. Like, just to give an example, I've been doing the open mic here for almost 6 years, and it wasn't until about 4 weeks ago that they decided to start posting it in the Boston Globe. You'd write them, they do it 1 week, they drop it. And the person who's on the job here has managed to get this done. And that's the difference between having somebody who's just doing it part-time and somebody whose full-time job it is to promote certain stuff in the club. So, and with the downstairs has totally changed the entire tenor of the club. And I will have to say that initially I was against it. I thought they were taking too big a risk. Now I would have to say I was proven wrong, and that the downstairs has become the backbone of this place, and the upstairs is almost ancillary.
I would agree. Do you have any idea how much money Joseph and Nabil invested in order to renovate the downstairs room?
It was in the very least at the 5-figure level.
Okay.
So, more than that I couldn't say. Discretion is the better part of valor. I would want to be exposed as being totally ignorant by venturing a guess.
Sure.
But I think 5 figures is a pretty safe place to start. And that could mean from 10 to 99,000. It might even be more, but I don't think so.
Okay.
Now, because you hear all sorts of preposterous figures. Dave Sheehan would probably know a little more about that than I would.
That's a question I was going to bounce off him. I just thought I'd try you as well.
It wasn't under Dave's. Well, let's see now. When did the downstairs officially open? It was right around election time of '92. I did the first show down there, in fact, although it wasn't officially open for business, and it was just me and a few of my friends.
Okay.
And, I just went down there without a microphone, and just to break the place in.
Oh, cool. So you emceed the show that night?
No, it was just me. I was just up there and doing a performance.
Oh.
I gave a speech down there for me and some of the staff and a couple of other people who were there,
Okay.
And so, I don't know. I should tell you in the waning moments, I guess, of this interview about the open mic.
Okay.
I'll give you a real quick rundown of that.
Sure.
Billy Ruane decided to start because there was this open mic at the 1369 Jazz Club, and they shut down in August of 1988, so we moved it over with their MC, Jeffrey Gagnon. We moved it over to the Middle East.
Okay.
And Jeffrey ran it for a good 6 months or so, maybe even a little longer. We had this guy named Tom Blue come in and video it, and he would run it on Cambridge Community Access. And then Jeff dropped out, Tom moved out, but I continued the open mic anyway.
Manufacturer and FDA.
You asked Dr. Wise how many deaths would have been significant in my son's lot number. What did Dr. Wise say to you?
He said, I can't answer that for you. He didn't say, I won't answer that for you. He said, I can't answer that for you. I took that to mean he didn't know, because there's no limit set up. There's no number. There's no magic number. That's what I wanted to know. What is the magic number? If 10 isn't enough, is 20? Is 30? Is 40? What's enough?
Dr. Weiss wouldn't speak with us about his conversation with Kathy Schaus, but we asked the same questions of his supervisor, Dr. Jerome Donlin. How many deaths would it take for the FDA to say, we have to get this lot off the market and look at it?
There are a number of considerations that would go into that, because the number of reports of deaths has to be looked at compared to the size of the lot. You have to analyze those deaths to see what type of patterns of deaths are occurring there.
But yet, doctor, for us to determine whether 10 deaths or 20 deaths is acceptable, we'd have to know, like you, the size of the lot, yet you won't tell us that.
The manufacturers have considered their size of their lots to be proprietary information that we do not divulge in confidential, in respect of the confidentiality.
The drug companies wouldn't tell us the size of the lots. The FDA said they can vary from 50,000 to as many as 600,000 shots, then change the number to 800,000, then to over 1 million.
What industry is permitted to put out a product to the public, and if they must have a recall because of an injury that might be caused, every time, we know how many are out there. They report it on the news. But here's a vaccine that's being administered. We know of 10 confirmed unduplicated deaths, and we ask the question, how many vaccines did you give out there on that? That's confidential. What's wrong?
The Schauses decided to share the VIIRS information they uncovered. They turned to the National Vaccine Information Center, a support group of parents who believe their children were damaged by vaccines. They pored over the computer data and found more suspicious lots. Lots that could be on the market today. Lots that doctors who give the shots don't know about.
We cannot find out from the government what the mechanism is to institute a recall.
We asked the FDA's Donlan for some answers. We've just recently gotten the spreadsheets on 2 more lots. 2A 41127. 11 deaths reported and 125 adverse reactions. 2E 41060. 10 deaths reported in that lot with 131 adverse reactions. Are you familiar with those lots at all?
I'm not specifically familiar with those lots. I'd have to, check the records. I'm sure our staff has a breakdown of the reports on those.
But you have not recalled a lot of pertussis vaccine based on the reporting from VIIRS for the last 3.5 years by the deaths or high.
That's correct.
Adverse events.
That's correct.
This concludes Cafe Cabaret. Tune in next week for The Wrong Hero, starring in Double Negative.